work, for example, if you're working with a young person who has gone to college and then has that seemingly insurmountable debt, that chunk of change that they need to pay for that college? How do you decide whether getting a lump sum or a partial good chunk of change versus annuity works?
Great question. It's not an all or nothing situation when you go to a structured settlement. I'm a huge advocate of pay off your debt. Get rid of the credit cards, pay them off, cut them up, what have you. And I understand that young people basically need to set up house, they need furniture, they might need a car. Money has to be paid up front for that. And so when I deal with someone who is 20 to 30 years old, I don't really have a lot of success or reason to structure money because they have more need for it. When it's a substantial amount of money, that's a different story, and you're paying for the substantial needs that they may have. When I get to people in their 30s and 40s, it might be supplemental income. They may say, Chris, take some money and put it off until my retirement. A wonderful, wonderful small dollar amount, put it out till you're 62, pay it for 5 years on a monthly basis, because if you cannot take your Social Security and defer taking it, it continues to grow. It doubles.
That's a very good financial point.
It takes so little money for somebody 30 or 40 or even 50 years of age to say, pay me $2,000 a month from age 62 to age 67. And I've done a study on this, and their payment from Social Security will pretty much double. It's about a 45-50% increase.
And would you factor in how much money they have available to them, whether it's their savings or their Social Security, to determine
sure,
what
other
that
sources of income?
Yes.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a whole package. It's not a set and concrete form that we use, but those are the things we think of first and see, would this be applicable or what's your circumstance? It's a lot of conversation that helps me come up with the package.
So would it in fact put you in a position to not only be the settlement planner, but also a bit of a financial planner
Absolutely.
For the whole picture?
Absolutely.
I was just going to say that same thing. You go into a lot of the same elements. We mentioned last show, I think, about a couple of larger cases David and I have been fortunate to be involved in over the last 7 years or so. And you'll sit with these families and you'll say, okay, what do we need to take care of here? And Chris is very good at this. He's got a background in financial planning and investments, and it serves him well. But you'll talk about, okay, what are we going to need? How about health insurance for the family? Where's that going to come from now that the breadwinner isn't working anymore? Well, we're going to create a fund to pay for that health insurance for as long as you need it. How about just monthly income and needs? How about for a woman who's paralyzed and is going to need a new vehicle every so often? They're not just going to get a vehicle off the rack. They're going to need a retrofitted, specially equipped vehicle. So every 5 to 7 years, when that one runs out, here comes a check, whether they need it or not, in the mail as part of that settlement that's going to fund that next vehicle.
So that's an important consideration.
Absolutely.
Anything you can think of.
Right.
Yeah.
No.
One of their catastrophic cases, and this is similar to a lot of them, we make sure there's a payment stream to replace income. We make sure there's a payment stream to cover the Blue Cross payment every month. We make sure that there's a payment stream to lease an automobile every month. We make sure that annually there's money there to pay the mortgage. There's money there to pay the taxes. There's always money in the budget, whether I lump it all together or whether I do multiple payment streams, because it's budgeting is what it comes down to. And most people don't live on a budget, but we try to get them on a budget because that way you can make the funds last for the rest of their life if necessary.
And that's what I was saying when I said Chris will come in and we'll look at each individual situation, not only the injury that individual has suffered, but the whole totality of their circumstances as we create, and Chris puts together a plan with us to structure the finances out.
And just to be clear, we've talked about a settlement happening sometimes that you negotiate in lieu of going to trial. But considering you two are lawyers, isn't it often to your advantage to go to trial? It's more work for you. It's more, perhaps you can't settle. Maybe there's not an agreeable way of negotiating. Isn't it often in your best interest to see that through as far as you possibly can, possibly going to trial?
Well, the cases we've worked with, Bob and I, were settled before trial. And I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on Chris, if you have to go all the way through trial, get a verdict, and get paid that way, you lose the ability to structure a case
Is that almost always true?
Unless it's settled after the verdict,
Okay.
which is, you know,
That's an important thing
Except
to
in New
mention.
York State where it's required, but.
right, in Rhode Island.
In Rhode Island,
Most-
if you get a verdict, the verdict is going to be paid out in a lump sum, and including interest that the jury tacks onto it.
Right.
And that's the only way it happens. Workers' comp cases don't go to trial in the same way that a personal injury case does. A workers' comp case typically only goes to trial to prove whether the injury was work-related or not, and then they're just paying benefits to someone.
Good
A workers'
point.
comp case settles only if that injury is serious enough where it looks like it's going to be a long-term obligation for the insurance company, and in those occasions, sometimes the two parties can get together and try to decide on a settlement of the remainder of that claim. But most cases, I think every lawyer that does what we do, you always attempt to try to settle a claim. Why? Because trials are uncertain.
Yes.
They're lengthy, they're time-consuming, and they're very expensive. So to just automatically say you're going to go to a trial, you always have to be ready to.
Right.
But you always want to be in a position where you'll entertain a reasonable settlement because it takes all the uncertainty and guesswork out of it.
Yes, Chris?
And Deb, they'll certainly verify it. It's roughly 98% of cases settle outside of trial.
Whether it's an
It-
auto injury or
Or
med
a
mal
massive
or...
medical malpractice case, they settle outside of the court.
Right.
Cases that go to court, and you fellows know better than I do, are cases that the defendant just absolutely feels in his fact that they're not involved in this particular case. And the injured person just feels they are involved and they have to try the case to get some compensation for it. They see the case diametrically opposed, and there's no middle ground for either
That's
side.
usually a liability issue where
Yes.
the defendant thinks that I can get a defense verdict, I'm not going to pay anything out, why would I pay a large amount of money out on a case I can win? And the plaintiff's attorney is looking at a case where there's grave and catastrophic injuries and needs to pursue it because there's not enough money being offered to resolve it. And every case, it really comes down to, is there enough money to settle the case? If there's not, you have to try it.
The largest percentage of cases that go to trial are medical malpractice or medical negligence cases. It's just the way it is. Doctors and hospitals obviously are going to stick up for themselves and say we didn't do anything wrong, and often the stakes are very, very high. And for that reason, many of those cases will go to trial, or at least a higher percentage than the average motor vehicle
Mediation
case.
is the way that most cases are settled. And I'll attend a mediation, the attorneys, the insurance carrier, the injured party. We're at mediation, and the two sides discuss the issues. And I try to help bridge the gap
Right.
and try to make what's needed work with what money's available.
Right. It's important,
Good
see,
point.
in a catastrophic injury type of case for us to have Chris there so that when we have an offer and we know how much money is available to put into a structure, he can run numbers on his computer right there for us to say, all right, this is what we can do with that.
Yeah.
Is that going to take care of your client?
I often try to say, I translate what a lump sum of money means to your life.
I was just going to say the same thing. If this, let's say, use $1 million as an example,
Sure.
and someone puts $1 million on the table, that's a lot of money in anybody's life, but it's a big chunk of money. You take, costs and fees out of that, and the person's left with a certain amount. What Chris does is takes that amount of money and says, here's what it means to you, Mr. Smith. I can do this for you. You can get a monthly income of X amount. You know those medical needs your wife needs? This will pay for that. Those prescriptions she has to take for the rest of her life, the medications, that'll cover that. And all of a sudden it becomes real for the person. And I think we've commented on this with a lot with Chris. 10, 15 years ago, when everybody thought they were a genius in investments and could make a lot of money in the stock market, sometimes they'd look at Chris's alternative of structured settlement annuity and say, boy, that doesn't sound so exciting to me. I'll take that $500,000 and I'll turn it into $3 million. Well, people have learned the hard way, right, over
Goes
the
right
last
back
10
to
years
$500,000
that it
or
doesn't
less.
go anywhere. So what he's doing is he's guaranteeing you, while the return may not be enormous, you're going to get a return.
And there's no risk on
It's
the principal
tax-free,
at all.
and there's no risk. It's always going to be there for you as long as it says it's going to be there.
Explain how that's insured in the companies that you use.
Yeah, first off, Congress enacted this legislation to basically give extra benefit to the injured people. And by taking away the tax obligation of it and not being reportable, you can buy tax-free bonds, but it still goes on your tax return. These dollars don't go on a tax return because they're not income. And that's
State or federal.
State or federal. Congress said personal injury settlement dollars, and that's physical personal injury.
Meaning?
Meaning age discrimination, wrongful termination. You've got a lawsuit, you'll collect money, but it's taxable. You've
Okay.
got to have physical
Injury.
injury, personal bodily injury to qualify